When our parents left me and my little brother alone, I offered him something he couldn't refuse, something that would become the most unforgettable chapter of our lives. My name is Aaron, and I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this. Growing up, my younger brother James and I shared a bond that felt unbreakable. He was 5 years younger than me, always the one I looked out for, the kid I defended on the playground and helped through math homework. But as time passed, life started pulling us in different directions. I moved on to college, then into a full-time job, while James was still navigating high school and figuring himself out. Our parents were constantly working. Their jobs didn't leave much time for family. They weren't bad parents, just busy ones. That meant a lot of the responsibility of watching over James ended up on my shoulders once I was old enough to drive and take care of things at home. But I never saw it as a chore. James was always easy to be around, good-natured, cheerful, and eager to help. After I moved out, though, things changed. I was 24 now, living in a modest apartment across town. I didn't visit home as much as I probably should have, and a constant guilt nagged at me. James was growing up without me around. The little kid I remembered was slowly becoming a stranger, and that hurt more than I liked to admit. One weekend, our parents told me they'd be going away for a business retreat and that James would be alone for 3 days. Mom called me, her voice laced with concern, asking if I could stay with him. "He's old enough to take care of himself," she said, "but I'd feel better knowing you're there." I agreed, mostly because I felt bad. I didn't have anything pressing planned, and maybe spending some time with James would help us reconnect. When I pulled up to the house, James greeted me with his usual crooked smile. "Long time no see, stranger," he joked, wrapping me in a quick hug. Yeah, I said, rolling my eyes but smiling. "Missed me?" He laughed, stepping aside to let me in. The house hadn't changed. It was tidy, lived in, and carried the faint scent of lemon cleaner. Being back felt oddly surreal, like stepping into a memory from years ago. That first evening, we caught up over dinner. James told me about school, his friends, his plans for college. I shared bits and pieces about my job and life in the city. It was nice, natural, like no time had passed at all. But as the hours went by, I started to notice things about him I hadn't before. James wasn't a kid anymore. He was taller now, broader in the shoulders, his voice deeper. There was a calm assurance about him, a subtle maturity that hadn't been there before. It threw me off. I found myself wrestling with the image of the little brother I remembered and the young man now sitting across from me. Later that night, after dinner and dishes, James suggested we watch a movie. "Something good," he said, flipping through the options on TV. "Not one of your boring picks." "Excuse me?" I said, feigning offense. "My taste is flawless." He smirked and finally landed on a comedy we'd watched a dozen times before. As the opening credits played, he flopped onto the couch beside me, legs stretched out as he got comfortable. For a while, it was easy to lose myself in the familiarity. We laughed at the same jokes, quoted lines we both knew by heart, and slipped into a rhythm that felt safe, comforting. But occasionally, I caught James glancing at me. It wasn't weird or uncomfortable, just focused. There was a depth to his gaze that made my stomach flutter. I told myself it was nothing. He was my brother. I was overthinking it. Wasn't I? When the movie ended, James stretched and yawned. "I'm gonna grab a drink," he said, heading to the kitchen. I stayed on the couch, thumbing through my phone, waiting for him to come back. Then I heard him call out, "Hey Aaron, want anything?" "Sure," I answered. Surprised me. He came back with 2 glasses of soda, handed me one, then sat down again, this time closer. His knee brushed mine as he settled in. The contact sent a subtle jolt through me. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my tone even. He shrugged, sipping his drink. "No problem." We sat quietly, the hum of the TV in the background. I tried to focus on my phone, but I could feel him beside me, his warmth, his nearness. It was oddly distracting. I shifted, unsure what to do with the energy hanging between us. The silence stretched on. The TV cast a soft glow over the room, shadows flickering on the walls. I kept scrolling, pretending I wasn't hyper-aware of every time his knee bumped mine. Just proximity, I told myself. That's all it is. So, James said suddenly, cutting through the quiet, what's life like in the big city? Do you ever miss it here? It was a simple question, but the way he looked at me made me pause. Sometimes, I said, setting my phone down. I like the space, though, having my own place, doing my own thing. He nodded, leaning back into the couch. Makes sense. Still, it's weird not having you around. The house feels emptier. I smiled faintly, unsure what to say. I miss it here sometimes, I admitted. But, you know, life moves on. Yeah, he said quietly. I guess it does. Something in his tone tugged at me. Wistfulness, maybe. It made my chest ache. I glanced over and saw him deep in thought, his brow slightly furrowed. He looked different. Older. There was a seriousness in him I hadn't noticed before. It made me realize that he wasn't just my little brother anymore. He was his own person now, with his own inner world. That realization was jarring. I shifted, slightly, breaking the moment. Well, I said, keeping my voice upbeat, you'll be out of here soon. College, new friends, whole new life? Maybe, he said with a shrug. But it's not the same. You were always the one I could talk to, you know, when stuff got hard. Hard? I echoed, frowning. What do you mean? He looked down briefly, then back up at me. Just, after Dad got so busy and Mom was always working, I felt alone a lot. But you were always there. You made things easier. His words hit me hard. Guilt surged in my chest. I hadn't realized how much he'd leaned on me. I'm sorry, James, I said softly. I didn't know. He gave a small smile and shrugged again. It's not your fault. You had your own stuff going on. But I'm glad you're here now. Me too, I said, reaching out to squeeze his shoulder. I'm always here if you need me. You know that, right? Yeah, he said, smiling wider. I know. For a second, everything felt right again. Normal, easy, but then I became aware of my hand still resting on his shoulder, and the way he was looking at me. His gaze was softer now, unreadable. I pulled my hand back quickly, cheeks warming. Anyway, I said, clearing my throat, we should probably get some sleep. It's getting late. Yeah, he said, standing and stretching. Good idea. He started up the stairs, then paused and looked back. Good night, Aaron. Good night, I replied, forcing a smile as he disappeared from view. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My thoughts were a mess. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us, something subtle but real. I turned off the TV and walked into the kitchen to rinse out my glass. The house was still now, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound filling the quiet. I stared out the window for a while, watching the shadows of the trees sway in the moonlight, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't untangle when I finally made my way to bed. Sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake for what felt like hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of the strange tension that had settled over the house. James's words, his lingering looks. The way he'd spoken to me, it all felt significant, though I couldn't explain why, but I knew for a fact that something was going to happen, and later, I would find out I was right. The next morning, I woke to the sound of faint music drifting up from the kitchen. I sat up, groggy and disoriented, and checked. The time it was later than I'd thought, the sun already high. In the sky, I got dressed quickly and headed downstairs following the sound of the music. James was in the kitchen humming along to a song on the radio. As he made breakfast, he was wearing a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair slightly messy from sleep. He looked so much like the kid I used to tease and take care of, but at the same time he didn't. He was older now, more self-assured, and it caught me off guard. "Morning," he said, glancing up as I walked in. "I made eggs. Want some?" "Sure," I said, sitting down at the table. "Thanks." He set a plate in front of me and sat down across from me, his easy smile making it hard to stay in my head for a while. We ate in companionable silence, the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows and casting a golden glow over the room. "This is nice," James said suddenly, breaking the core quiet. "Having you here. It feels like old times." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "It does." But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't the same. The comfortable familiarity of our relationship had been replaced by something I couldn't quite name, something that made my chest tighten and my thoughts race, and as much as I tried to push it aside, I knew it wasn't going away. The morning drifted by in a days of routine, but the underlying tension between James and me lingered. He seemed more relaxed than I was humming along to the radio as he cleaned up the kitchen while I busied myself with small tasks. To avoid thinking too much, it felt like every glance, every word carried a weight I couldn't ignore. By the time lunch rolled around, I was restless. James suggested watching another movie, but I wasn't in the mood to sit still. "Why don't we go for a walk?" he suggested Ed, hoping the fresh air would clear my head. James grinned. "Sounds good. Let me grab my shoes." We headed out into the neighborhood, the quiet streets lined with tall trees and neatly trimmed lawns. It was the kind of place that always felt the same. No matter how much time passed, we walked side by side, chatting about nothing in particular, his classes, my work, the neighbor's dog that barked at anything that moved. It felt easy again, like slipping into a rhythm we hadn't found in years. But even as we laughed and joked, I couldn't ignore the occasional way his shoulder brushed against mine or the way his eyes lingered on me when he thought I wasn't looking. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination running wild, but deep down I knew it wasn't. We reached the park at the end of the street. The familiar sight of the swings and the faded basketball court bringing back a rush of childhood memories. James sat on one of the swings, his long legs nearly touching the ground, and gestured for me to join him. I hesitated for a moment before sitting on the swing next to him, the chain squeaking softly. As I leaned back, "This place hasn't changed a bit," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "It feels like we spent half our childhood here, probably because—" "We did," he said, laughing. "You always insisted on pushing me on the swings even when I told you I could do it myself because you always jumped off and landed in the mud." I shot back, grinning. "Mom made me promise to keep you out of trouble." He chuckled, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. "You were always looking out for me, of course," I said, softly. "You're my little brother." He didn't respond right away, his expression growing thoughtful. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if Dad were around more?" His question caught me off guard, and I glanced at him, unsure how to answer. "I guess," I said, finally, "but you've turned out pretty great. You know, you don't need him to be proud of you." His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the vulnerability in his gaze made my chest ache. "Thanks," he said quietly. "That means a lot." We sat there in silence for a while, the sounds of the park birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze filling the space between us. It was a peaceful moment, but the tension from before still lingered just beneath the surface. Eventually, James stood up, brushing his hands against his jeans. "We should head back," he said. "It's starting to get chilly." "Yeah," I said. Following his lead, the walk home felt longer. The quiet between us heavier now. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were dancing around something neither of us knew how to address. By the time we got back to the house, I was ready to retreat to the safety of the guest room and clear my head. But James had other "Plans, Leighton, play a game," he said, grinning as he grabbed the controller for the console. "Loser does the dishes tonight." "You're on," I said, grateful for the distraction. For the next hour we fell into an easy rhythm, the competitive banter and laughter easing. Some of the tension. James won most of the rounds, Ash always did, but I managed to snag a victory or two, much to his dismay, by the time we finished. It felt like the strange energy from earlier had lifted, at least for a little while. "I'm still not doing the dishes," I said as we turned off the console, crossing my arms. "In mock defiance, fair enough," he said, laughing. "I'll let you off the hook this time." The rest of the evening passed quietly. We ate dinner, talked about plans for the next day, and eventually settled into our usual routines. But as the house grew quieter and the night wore on, the tension began to creep back in. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building between us, something unspoken but impossible to ignore. But later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, something unexpected happened. I heard the soft creak of the floorboards outside my room. My heart jumped and I froze, listening intently as the footsteps grew closer. Then came the knock. Aaron James's voice was quiet, hesitant. I sat up, my pulse racing. "Yeah, can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, glancing at the clock. It was late and the house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. "Downstairs. What's wrong?" I asked. I need to talk to you," he said, his voice barely audible. I sighed, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. "Okay, come in." The door creaked open and James stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment before crossing the room to sit at the edge of the bed. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady. Despite the unease twisting in my stomach, he didn't answer. Right away, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, "finally about us, about how much you mean to me." His words made my heart race and I struggled to keep my expression neutral. "James, you're my brother," I said carefully. "Of course we mean a lot to each other. That's how family works. It's not just that," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "You've always been there for me in a way. No one else has. You've always understood me, James." I started, but he cut me off. "I don't want to ruin anything," he said quickly, "but I need you to know how much you mean to me. I don't know what I'd do without you." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I couldn't fully process. I stared at him, my thoughts racing as the unspoken tension between us finally came to a head. The weight of James's words settled heavily between us, the silence stretching far longer than it should have. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but nothing came out. His gaze stayed fixed on me, vulnerable and searching, and I could feel the walls I'd carefully built over the years beginning to crack. "James," I said, finally, my voice soft but firm. "I don't think you realize how hard this is for me to hear." He frowned, his brows furrowing as he shook his head. "I'm not trying to make things harder for you," he said. I needed to say it to get it out." I exhaled deeply, running a hand through my hair as I tried to gather my thoughts. "You mean a lot to me, too," I said carefully. "But we're siblings, James. We've always looked out for each other because that's what family does. It's more than that," he said, his voice trembling. "You know, it is." I shook my head, my chest tightening. "You're just confused," I said, though. The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. We've both been through a lot. Especially with Mom and Dad being gone so much, it's natural to feel closer. Because of that, it's not confusion," he said, his voice steadier. "Now it's how I feel and I know it's not normal, but I can't pretend it doesn't exist." I stood up from the bed, pacing the small room as I tried to process everything. My thoughts were a jumbled mess torn between wanting to comfort him and the undeniable sense that something had gone terribly wrong. "James," I said, turning to face him, "we can't keep talking like this. It's not fair." To either of us, his expression faltered a flicker of hurt. Crossing his face, "I'm not asking you for anything," he said. I just needed you to know. The raw honesty in his voice left me speechless. I sat back down on the bed, my shoulders slumping as the weight of the situation bore down on me. "I don't know what to say," I admitted quietly. "You don't have to say anything," he said. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. The room felt suffocating, the tension almost palpable. I wanted to fix things, to make everything go back to the way it was before, but I didn't know how. We need to find a way to move past this. I said finally, "You're my brother James. That's never going to change." He nodded slowly, though his expression remained conflicted. "I don't want to lose you," he said. "You're the only one who really gets me. You're not going to lose me," I said firmly. "But we need to set boundaries. This isn't something we can dwell on." The silence that followed was heavy, but necessary. James stood up after a moment, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I know." I said, my tone soft, "and I'm not upset with you, but we need to be careful, James, for both our sakes." He nodded again, lingering by the door for a moment before finally stepping out. The soft click of the door shutting behind him felt like a release, but the tension in my chest didn't ease. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty room and trying to make sense of everything that had just happened, and I don't know how, but I just knew that something was about to happen between us. I could feel it. The next morning was quiet, the atmosphere in the house noticeably different. James didn't join me for breakfast, and I didn't press him. I told myself he needed space just as much as I did and that things would settle with time, but as the day wore on, the silence between us became harder to bear. By the afternoon, I decided to try breaking these. I found him in his room, sitting on the edge of his bed with his headphones on. He looked up when I knocked, pulling the headphones off, and offering a small, hesitant smile. "Hey," I said, stepping inside. "How are you holding up?" He shrugged his gaze, dropping to the floor. "I'm fine." I sat down beside him, leaving enough space between us to feel comfortable. "I know things are weird right now," I said, "but I want us to figure this out. I don't want there to be tension between us." "I don't either," he said quietly, "but I don't know how to fix it." "We'll figure it out," I said, offering a reassuring smile. "It's going to take time, but we'll get there." He glanced at me, his expression softening. "Thanks," he said, "for not freaking out." "I'm your brother," I said simply. "I'll always have your back." The tension eased slightly, and for the first time in what felt like days, I felt a glimmer of hope. We talked for a while longer, steering the conversation toward lighter topics, school friends and the upcoming weekend. The time I left his room, the weight on my chest had lifted, if only slightly, but as the house grew quiet again that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things weren't truly resolved. James's words, his emotions, and the undeniable intensity of the past few days stayed with me, leaving me restless and uncertain, and as much as I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew this was far from over. The house was silent that night, but my mind was anything but. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. James's words from earlier replayed in my head. His vulnerability, his honesty, the weight of everything he'd admitted. I told myself things would go back to normal, that this was just a bump in the road, but deep down I wasn't sure. And then it happened around midnight. I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. My chest tightened as they drew closer, stopping just outside my door. I sat up, holding my breath as I waited. Then came the knock, quiet and hesitant, just like the night before. Aaron James's voice was barely audible. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "Yeah, can I come in?" My heart raced as I hesitated. Glancing at the clock, it was late and the house was dark and quiet, but I couldn't bring myself to turn him away again. I asked. There was a silence for a second. "Okay," I said softly. "Come in." The door creaked open and James stepped inside. He looked nervous. His hands shoved deep into his pockets, his shoulders slightly hunched. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a moment before crossing the room to sit at the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know. I shouldn't be here. It's okay," I said, quickly though. My pulse was racing. "What's on your mind?" He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the floor. I've been thinking a lot about what I said earlier and I'm scared I messed everything up." "You didn't," I said, firmly. Leaning forward, "James, I told you we'll figure this out, but it's going to take time." "I know," he said, his voice trembling, "but it's hard. I feel like I'm stuck in my own head, and I don't know how to get out." I placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing, gently. "You're not alone," I said. "We'll get through this together." He looked up, then his eyes meeting mine, and the intensity in his gaze made my chest tighten. "You've always been there for me," he said softly, even when no one else was. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You don't have to think about that," I said, my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere for a moment." Neither of us said anything. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. I didn't know how to navigate James's expression. It was raw, vulnerable in a way I had never seen before, and it left me at a loss for words. "I just want things to be okay." "Again," he said finally, his voice breaking, "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I say it, my own voice trembling now. "But we need to set boundaries. James, this isn't something we can let take over." He nodded slowly, though his expression was conflicted. "I know," he said. "I'm trying." "I know you are," I said. My voice softer now, and that's what matters. The tension in the room shifted slightly, not disappearing, but settling into something less suffocating. James didn't stand to leave, as I'd expected. Instead, he lingered, his eyes searching mine as though trying to find something he couldn't quite name. The air between us felt charged, every breath magnified by the silence. "James," I said after a moment, my voice quiet but steady, "we can't keep circling around this. It's not healthy for either of us." "I know," he said again, his tone almost a whisper, "but I don't know how to let it go." His honesty was disarming, and I found myself leaning forward slightly, as if close in the physical space between us might somehow bridge the emotional gap as well. "Maybe," I said carefully, "you need to face it head on." He frowned, confusion flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" I hesitated, my heart pounding as I considered my words. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "the only way to move past something is to stop running from it, to acknowledge it fully." His gaze held mine, his brow burrowing as he processed what I was saying. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," I interrupted gently, "that maybe you need to stop bottling everything up to let yourself feel it, so you can finally let it go." His eyes widened slightly, realization dawning on him. "Aaron, it's okay," I said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his. "It's just a moment, nothing more." He didn't move for a long moment, his gaze locked on mine, the weight of the room pressing down on us, and then, tentatively, he leaned in, our lips met briefly, just the lightest brush, tentative and filled with the weight of unspoken emotions. It was over almost as quickly as it began, leaving the air between us heavy with silence. James pulled back, his expression a mixture of shock and uncertainty. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't mean. No, James, don't worry. I offered it myself. I said. He looked me in the eyes for a second, not saying anything. Damn, I had quite a handsome. Brother, I quite liked it. I continued, do it again, with a little hesitation. He leaned in again, and we kissed once. Again, this time heavier, as if we were both experimenting with what the lines were. Eventually, we stopped for a second, and I moved my hand to a certain place, initiating something. Way beyond the boundaries full of disbelief, he looked me in my eyes, and without a word, I did it. I went further, we both went further, and what we did was crazy. I have to admit, but it was good. So good. It was amazing. Eventually, when we both had finished, we lay down there realizing what had just happened. Wow, James said, breaking the silence. I don't know what to think of it. Honestly, it's okay, I said quickly, cutting him off. It's done now. We can move forward. He looked at me, his eyes filled with questions, but he didn't say anything. Slowly, he stood, his movements careful, as though afraid to disturb the fragile peace we'd found. Good night, Aaron, he said. Quietly, good night, I replied. Watching as he left the room when the door clicked, shut behind him, I let out a shaky breath, my thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The moment had been fleeting, but it felt significant, a line crossed, but perhaps one that would allow us both to find clarity. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could navigate it together. The next morning, the house felt lighter. Somehow, James joined me for breakfast. His demeanor more relaxed than it had been in days we talked about plans for the day, the conversation easy and comfortable. It felt like a step in the right direction, and I clung to that hope as the hours passed. When it was finally time for me to leave, James walked me to the door. Josh wasn't home yet, but that felt like a blessing. In disguise, this was something I needed to handle on my own. Thanks for staying. James said, his smile soft but genuine. It meant a lot. I'm glad I did, I said, and I'll be back soon. Okay, we'll keep talking, we'll figure it out. He nodded, his expression hopeful. Yeah, we will. As I drove away, the house grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but the weight of everything that had happened stayed with me. The days ahead would be difficult. I knew, but for the first time in a while, I felt like we were on the right path, and that was enough. Back at my apartment, life resumed its usual rhythm, but the memory of that night stayed with me. I found myself thinking about James more often than I cared to admit, wondering how he was, coping, whether he had found the clarity he needed. A few weeks later, he texted me. Hey, just wanted to say thanks again. Things feel clearer now. I'm doing okay. He stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm glad. Take it one step at a time. Okay, I'm always here. If you need me. His response was simple. You know, I'll be fine. It wasn't closure, not exactly, but it was a step forward, and for now, that was enough. Still, till this day, I am not so sure what to think of it. I'm curious what other people think of it. Is it okay what I have done, what we have done? Should I feel guilty? Please let me know in the comments. It would help me a lot, thank you.